How many times have you started a budget and then quit? Be honest, because for most people, it's not once or twice. It's like this repeating cycle that just keeps happening year after year. And every time you think, okay, this time is different. Well, this time I got the right tool. This time I set up the spreadsheet, and this time I'm actually going to stick to it. And then you don't. And the worst part, you start to think the problem is you. Like maybe you're just not that kind of a person who's good with money. Maybe budgeting is just for people who are naturally disciplined or organized or, whatever. But here's what I want to tell you right from the start. The story you're telling yourself is not the right way of looking at it. And by the end of this, I think you're gonna see why. Okay, let's just pretend it's the start of the new year and you wanna start going to the gym. You go and the gym is packed. Everyone's excited, everyone's got a plan, and everyone's motivated. They got all the new shoes, the new playlist, and for like 2 weeks, it's actually working. They're showing up, they feel good, and then life happens. Everyone gets busy, they miss one day, then two, then they stop going, and the gym bag is just sitting in the corner collecting dust, and they feel vaguely guilty every time they just look at it. Well, that's budgeting. You feel motivated at first, you set it all up, you track every dollar for a couple weeks, and then you forget to log one coffee. Then a few days go by. You open up the app, and there's like this big missing gap, and it's already broken. And you think, what's the point? And the reason isn't that budgeting doesn't work. The reason is that most budgets demand perfection, and perfection is exhausting. It's difficult to sustain it. Now, if you're in your early 20s right now, this stuff matters even more when you're younger. That's because your income is lower, your expenses are going up, you're building a life basically from scratch, covering rent, groceries, car stuff, and maybe some student loans on top of all that. So the margin for error is small. When you've only got a few $100 left after rent, one bad month doesn't just hurt. I mean, it can set you back for weeks, if not months. So yeah, budgeting matters, but probably not in the way you've been told it does. Here's something that doesn't get said enough in my opinion. Most people try to control their money before they even understand it. They jump straight to the rules. They'll say something like, I'll only spend $300 on food, or no eating out this month. I'm saving 20% no matter what. But they don't actually know what they're spending to begin with. It's like trying to lose weight without knowing how many calories you're eating. The goal sounds right, but the foundation is just not there. And look, I've been there. I've tried the fancy Excel workbooks, the online trackers, the apps with all the fancy charts and graphs, and some of them are really impressive, I'm not gonna lie. But after a few months, I just get tired of it. The upkeep felt like a part-time job. It started to feel exactly like counting every single calorie of every meal, which I did for a short period a while back ago. But that's not realistic for most people, and it's just not realistic for me either. Okay, so here's what eventually worked for me, and I still do this to this day. Instead of trying to build a strict budget, I started thinking about my operating costs. Think about how a business works for a second. Every business knows what it costs just to run each month. You got the rent, utilities, payroll, supplies, whatever their thing is. That's called OPEX, or operating expenditures. So at some point, I just asked myself, why don't I treat my own finances the same way? You are your own business. Your income is the revenue that's coming in. Your rent, groceries, car, subscriptions, those are your operating costs. And whatever's left over after all of that, that's your margin. That's what you get to save, invest, or have some flexibility with. So once you start looking at your money through that lens, the whole thing feels less like a punishment and more just like running your life, like it's something worth taking seriously. At least that's how I see it. Okay, so let me walk you through what this actually looks like in practice, because I want to be specific here and not just abstract. I put almost all of my expenses on credit cards, not to rack up debt or overspend, but just to centralize everything and make the tracking a little bit easier for me. Plus, the rewards and sign up bonuses are just too good to ignore. If you can pay off your balance in full every month without carrying interest, I highly recommend doing this instead of using debit or cash. I've earned enough points for many free flights, luxury hotel stays all over the world, and perks I've never would have had access to otherwise. I really think is one of the easiest ways to get more value out of your money that you're already spending. And funny story, I have a friend of mine who's pretty savvy with finances, but he's never used credit cards before. I've tried explaining all the benefits to him, like with the points, the protections, the free travel, and every time I bring it up, he just shrugs it off. It honestly blows my mind because he's leaving so much value on the table. And not to brag here, but this is just a small sample of the cards that I've opened up over the years. In total, it's way more than this, but I've honestly lost count at this point. But here's the thing, I don't rely on the credit card's built in spending breakdown. And I want to explain why, because a lot of people assume that's enough. Those automatic categories, they're often completely wrong. Like, for example, a pharmacy run will get tagged as health and wellness when you bought shampoo and snacks, or a restaurant charge somehow ends up under travel. And if you got multiple cards or cash expenses, Venmo payments, or subscriptions floating around, you're only ever going to see a fragment of your actual spending. It's never going to be the full picture. So instead, I use a simple expense tracker app on my phone. It's nothing fancy. And the key part is I log expenses the moment I make them. So, for example, like right after I walk out of the grocery store, I pull out my phone and record it. I'll even do it in the parking lot if I have to, because groceries are one of my biggest expenses. So, I want to know what I'm actually spending there each month. And it takes maybe like 5 seconds to do it. I'd much rather do that in the moment than save receipts and try to piece everything together at the end of each month. And the categories I've set up are pretty simple. It's things like rent, food, auto, personal spending, travel. I mean, that's basically it. And I have a few subcategories here and there, but it's nothing really complicated. And here's something I want to be really clear about. I don't track every single expense. If a small purchase slips through, I don't stress about it. A $3 coffee I forgot to log is not going to make or break my financial picture. The goal for me is to get a high level view. So this was from a while back ago, but rent came in just under $2,000, which is painful, but it was around 40% of my total expenses. Food was around 670 or 14%. Personal spending 227. Travel hit 996, roughly 20%. Now I can see something useful. Food is right around where it usually is, but travel clearly jumped. And from there, I can decide whether I want to pull back somewhere, not out of guilt, just based on what the data is telling me. That shift from guilt to data is really the whole point I'm trying to make. Let me tell you why traditional budgeting backfires for so many people. It really comes down to one word, and that is restriction. When you tell yourself no eating out, your brain registers that as a rule, and rules create resistance. 2 weeks later, you end up doing the exact opposite. You overspend, overindulge, blow a good chunk of your money in a single weekend, and there's actually some research on this. Studies show that most people consistently underestimate their own discretionary spending, and I'm guilty of it too, which means we're not just spending more than we think on wants, we don't even realize we're doing it. But when you shift from restriction to more towards awareness, something surprising happens. You start adjusting naturally. If you see that groceries ran $900 for 1 month, you'll probably ease off the next month without forcing yourself. The data does the work for you because emotion is usually what kills a budget, and the data removes the emotion. Here's another thing worth saying. Not all expenses are equal. Housing alone probably takes up more than 30% of the average household. Food is usually another big chunk, then you got transportation. Those three categories alone can make up 60 to 70% of what you spend every month. That's where the real decisions are. That's where changes actually move the needle. The $5 coffee everyone picks on, it was never really the problem unless you go to Starbucks like every other day. Then that's a different story. But the problem is the apartment upgrade, the car upgrade, buying fancy wheels and other aftermarket parts like I did, the subscriptions that quietly doubled over 3 years, the stuff nobody talks about because it doesn't really feel like a decision. It just kind of happens. And this is where lifestyle creep sneaks in, which is especially important as your income grows. You get a raise. Okay, very nice. So you decide to upgrade your home a little bit. Then you get a slightly nicer car. And then you say yes to more things. And suddenly you're making twice what you used to, and yet you still feel broke at the end of the month. Tracking your operating costs is what can prevent that because the numbers don't lie even when your lifestyle is trying to. Okay, so let's bring this all together with something concrete. First thing, know your after tax take home income. I'm not talking about your salary or your gross pay before taxes. It's the number that actually hits your bank account. That's your starting point. Then subtract your estimated monthly expenses. So things like rent, food, car, subscriptions, everything you typically spend in a month. Focus mainly on the big expenses first and don't get too caught up in the weeds on the little ones. Then account for whatever you're putting towards savings or investments. What's left is your margin or your cushion. That number tells you whether you have room to breathe or whether something needs to change. So let's say you take home $4,000 after taxes. Your average monthly expenses are $3,000. You're putting $500 towards investing or savings. So that leaves you a $500 buffer. Now you know exactly where you stand. You're not guessing or hoping. You're operating like a business that knows its numbers. Here's the part some people don't want to hear, and I may get some hate for it. You don't need a detailed budget. You need self-awareness. If you genuinely can't tell the difference between a want and a need, there's no app, no spreadsheet, no fancy color-coded system that's gonna fix that. That's really a mindset problem, not a tools problem. But flip that around. If you actually understand your spending patterns, even roughly, budgeting almost takes care of itself. You're not fighting yourself every month. You're just checking in, seeing what the numbers say, and making small adjustments when needed. So, if I had to summarize this to 3 steps, here it is. First, find your real after tax monthly income. Second, figure out your operating costs. Then, lastly, make decisions based on trends, not from one off months or gut feelings, but from patterns over time. That's it. No drama, no shame, just a cleaner way to see where you actually stand. Let me know how you're tracking your budget in the comments. I'm curious to see what's working for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.